Two big stories in Germany since we recorded the last episode that we want to talk about on Berlin Briefing today. One, the far-right AfD party was officially categorized right-wing extremist by Germany's domestic intelligence agency on Friday last week. And that means that they do say they have evidence that this party is working against the constitution of this country. And now, of course, the debate is in full swing. What follows from that? Could the party be banned by courts? And we have our very own AfD observer Matt Moore here in the studio today, looking forward very much to your insights and analysis and potentially also your own idea of what is realistically going to happen. So looking forward to that. But Matt and Bernd Riegert, who's also joining us here in the studio again. Thanks, Bernd. You actually have been observing that other big story coming out of Germany because, hooray, we have a chancellor, a new chancellor at last. But boy, this was a rocky start, right? And Friedrich Merz needed 2 rounds to get elected, and that has never happened before in the history since the end of the Second World War to a German chancellor. So we'll get to the bottom of why this matters and what the implications for his government might be in a bit. But this is day one. Merz is in the air and travelling already, and our colleague Michaela Küfner is travelling with him, and she sent us something from the tarmac just before Friedrich Merz took off on the government plane to visit France and Poland.
As newly elected, Chancellor Friedrich Merz sets off on his first trip to Paris and Warsaw. He has his work cut out for him. First of all, he has to convince his European partners that despite the fact that it took 2 votes, a historic first in German modern history, to get him elected as Chancellor, that doesn't mean that he is weakened, but he comes on the defensive. At the same time, he has a rapport with French President Emmanuel Macron. He will want to build on that when both set out to reform the European defense industry, make Europe less dependent on the United States, not just in defense terms. He will also then head to Warsaw, a very important visit to show German determination to defend the European Union, particularly on its eastern flank.
So, Matt, Merz is travelling in Europe and he's already given a press conference. We're recording on Wednesday afternoon. Michaela can't be here because she is travelling with the Chancellor. But we do need to spend a bit of time talking about that historic day. It's not too big a word, is it? I mean, you were at the President's office yesterday expecting sort of a normal German-style, almost boring, procedural swearing in of the German Chancellor. And then what happened?
Yeah, so you're always kind of led through security, and there's a kind of holding pen. On this occasion, we were off to the side out in the sun. It was nice, and then we were eventually taken in. And you're brought in minutes before the expected action is about to take place. And as we get into the room, it's only because a broadcaster there has the screen up, the live shot, that I first see this broadcaster watching the live shot and she gasped in the moment. And so then we had a good look and we saw he's fallen short, he's stumbled, and I have to say it was a kind of shell shock because we had just expected this to be a kind of run-of-the-mill, that it would be a done deal. And that's what I said in my report in the morning. I said it's a done deal. Look, it's 12. He's got a 12-seat majority. It's really slim, and it's fragile, but the prevailing consensus in Berlin is that this is a sure thing. So when it happened, I kind of had to admit I was a bit overwhelmed.
Yeah, and we had colleagues all over the place, of course, running around Bundestag as well. Some people were complaining about sore legs because they really did have to do some legwork trying to find information because this was so unexpected, right? Nobody, including politicians, including experienced members of parliament, had any idea how to deal with a situation like that because it had never happened. But Ben, you then took over from Matt in the president's office, and how big was the sigh of relief when Merz did make it in the second round?
Well, there was, of course, a sigh of relief because everybody was waiting. Also, the president was waiting in his office watching television and watching the proceedings. And then he came out and cracked a little joke and said, well, with a slight delay, now we can proceed and hand over the certifications of appointment. And that is what he did. And also the kitchen of the presidential palace cooked a soup for all the people waiting there. So it was a sigh of relief when it was over. Yeah. But of course it was also a sigh of relief if there would not have been a new government, then Germany would actually have been sliding into a big crisis. And the president also warned in his official speech that now it's time, to start working and solve problems. People are expecting that. Stop complaining, roll up your sleeves, and do something now. That's what he said. And of course, for Merz himself, for Friedrich Merz, the chancellor, the tense, he is the weakest whoever took office now in the history of the German Republic, and it's very embarrassing for him. I mean, they are now trying to paper it over and to water it down and say, well, it can happen, la la la. This is not true. This is a major accident, and it will take time to heal this, because now he has, with every legislation that he will table in Bundestag, he has to be afraid. Is the majority?
Absolutely, and I think that is a crucial point, because this was a secret ballot, right? But so we'll never find out who it was, but both sides started accusing each other straight away. So that just goes to show that the amount of trust in that new coalition government is something that they really need to work on hard. I mean, there were lots of members of parliament from the Conservatives and the Social Democrats who thought, no, actually, you know what, I'm not happy no matter what my party's decided, and I'm just going to put in my protest vote. Now, I'm imagining that there was a lot of really tough talking behind the scenes yesterday in Bundestag to get these people to agree with parliamentary group discipline in the end, because the majority is so slim. And like you say, for every major decision, Friedrich Merz is now trying to sell the story, okay, I'm going to go out and be a very convincing chancellor, and I have the foreign ministry also in the hands of my party, so this can all be a much more streamlined process. But allies will have to watch the German parliament a lot more closely than they were expecting to, right, Matt?
Yes, I think it's definitely a fragile coalition that is built, but it's not going to be exactly the same, right? Because the problem with yesterday was that it was a secret ballot, and I think they should scrap that. To be honest, I think why you shouldn't know how your MP has voted on a major issue like that.
There will be more secret ballots. Always when you decide on personnel, there's a secret ballot.
But, I'd say this morning, it's like, why is there a secret ballot? I should know exactly who you voted for, and it's transparent, and I can't really buy the argument for it. So I think with the House, like with the budget and with legislation in Parliament, there isn't a secret ballot, so there'll be less of people playing games and trying to kind of send a message, because they will have to then own up to that in front of the cameras and in their party. I do wonder, though, at least 18 members of the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats didn't vote with their leader yesterday, and it is like the message, the kind of the result of that is clearly there's some sort of frustration. You speak to Social Democrats this morning, they say we think the frustration is greater in the CDU ranks, and there's lots of reasons for that. We could probably talk about for days, but you're right, it just sends a kind of an unhelpful message for Friedrich Merz.
What I heard, and I thought that was nice, was that some people are saying, okay, now maybe we're going to see the opposite of what we saw with the last government, because they started with their nice pictures, taking selfies of the new cabinet, appointing lots of fresh young faces who were sort of social media literate people. And then we know how that crashed apart in November. So this is the one hope that people now have. Okay, they must have learnt their lesson.
Yeah, but it took them three years, and this was day one.
No, exactly, but now the
mistrust is already there.
But the hope is that the opposite is now going to happen with them.
There is kind of like a cold shower, a shock.
Yeah.
I think it might have that effect, because yesterday, I got the impression from where I was in the palace that people were dumbfounded, that nobody had really reckoned with that happening, and so there would have been, apart from the finger pointing and the trying to find out who did it, which is kind of actually pointless. I think there was a moment where they'll go, okay, we need to get to business.
Yeah, but for example, now the group leaders of the parties in the Bundestag are saying we don't want to know who it was. That's nonsense. Of course they want to know who it was, because they have to talk to these people, either to deliver some threats or to deliver some promises to get them on board again, because you need, with only 12 votes of a majority, you need them, all of them, every single one of them. So they have to find out who it was.
And interestingly, also the Conservatives yesterday needed the support from the far left party to change the rules to make it possible for that second vote to take place, because that was not something that was sort of self-evident. And that is an interesting thing, because, of course, the Conservatives have ruled out working together with the far-right AfD party, but they also, in 2018, decided as a party to not go together with the far-left. And that is now history, right? I mean, they needed the left party support yesterday. We saw, some of the higher ranking people in Bundestag having, very confident and sort of confidential looking talks.
Yeah, whispering and each other's ears. Yeah, I mean, yesterday was quite astonishing because of that, because of the need for, we need a solution really quickly, right? Because I think Friedrich Merz, it was super important for them to have this meeting with Macron today, and to have the meeting with Donald Tusk in Poland happen today, tomorrow and Thursday.
Absolutely, and that wouldn't have happened otherwise, right?
So it's things like that where you think, we do not need this to drag on. Yeah. The left party have their party conference on Friday. They didn't want it to drag on, so they were incentivized to get this done yesterday. Yeah. But I still think it was kind of showed a sign of confidence. I wonder, I'm totally fascinated by this. What changed, or what did they reckon with? Because to go with the second vote yesterday on the same day, you have to be supremely confident that you're not going to have egg on your face again, because then it's over, right? I mean, that's the consensus. But something must have been said or done in those backroom meetings where they realised they had the majority.
But you've already mentioned Warsaw again, and Michaela actually sent us something else. So she sent us a video from the plane where Friedrich Merz gave us an idea of who the important countries are going to be in his very first days in office. So let's just take a look at what Michaela sent.
These four, Germany, France, Great Britain and Poland, work closely together on foreign and security policy issues. I think that's a great asset, and that's why I'll try to simply get along well personally with the four heads of state and government on these issues, to cooperate well and make an effort to really formulate common political positions towards Russia, for example, and Ukraine, but also towards America.
So, Bernd, common political positions when it comes to the United States is what Friedrich Merz wants to find with European allies. So, you've been a Brussels correspondent, or you were a Brussels correspondent for a long time. Now you're a Berlin correspondent. Just how is that going to work? How do you think Friedrich Merz is using the opportunity today to sort of use Emmanuel Macron and Donald Tusk as sparring partners? Let's try and imagine Friedrich Merz wants to talk to Donald Trump on the phone very soon. He needs to have a strategy. So do you think they're going to play good cop, bad cop? How are they going to divide up that labor?
Finding common positions with the current administration in Washington, good luck with that. I can only say, of course, Mr. Merz has to say that. If you look at Europe, the positions are pretty clear. All of the Europeans are saying we have to talk to Trump about tariffs and defense. All of them except Hungary. So you can, Viktor Orban will not play along. And of course, Trump will be successful. Merz will be successful in forming an alliance with France and Poland and other European countries to deal with Trump, because they have to have a position. The latest in June, when the NATO summit will commence. So then they have to confront him somehow and convince him, or whatever, that Europe is united and will not play along and give in to all demands that Trump has. So it's a task that is necessary, and he has to do it quickly. And I hope he will succeed.
What language do you think Emmanuel Macron and and Friedrich Merz were talk to each other?
English.
Do you think they speak in English?
They both speak very well English. I don't know about his French.
No, he said a couple of words in French right now, and I was in Paris when Boris Pistorius, the defense minister, was there. He's fluent in French. I don't think that Friedrich Merz feels he needs to speak to Emmanuel Macron in French, because Emmanuel Macron is very confident, right, speaking English, and they both have this trading background and see themselves as players, sort of on the international stage. But of course, the relationship with the United States is also very difficult for Friedrich Merz to handle because of that other big story that we want to talk about today. So the classification of the far-right AfD party as a right-wing extremist party. So Matt, can you just tell us, what does that mean?
Yeah, so this is the Office for the Protection of the Constitution, which monitors threats to the German basic laws, it's called, and one of the things that they're monitoring kind of extreme small fringe groups, and that can be on the left, it can be on the right, it can be religiously motivated extremist groups, but for years now, they've been monitoring the Alternative for Germany party. It began in 2019 because they felt that there was enough evidence that this was a party that was in breach of a number of articles in the Constitution, the respect of human dignity, equality, a failure to reject totalitarianism, if you like, an embrace of totalitarianism, kind of not really embracing the democratic institutions of this country. And that has then been investigated over years. It's been challenged in the courts by the party, as you'd expect, and they have lost, and the institutions have won. And then on Friday, out of nowhere, really, we got this verdict that they had confirmed this suspicion. In order to do that, they would have to have, I think, seriously good evidence that shows that it's not just one or two people in the party. But you haven't seen
the report, right? And that is a big point of criticism also about the party itself, right?
It is a criticism. Like, the party is obviously will criticise the fact that they haven't seen the report, but that's how it works. The report first goes to the Interior Ministry, and they will look at the report, and
that is the other criticism, that they say it's politically motivated, that the other democratic parties are feeling increasingly threatened by the success of the far-right AfD, which is why they're saying, okay, this institution is not independent because, of course, it belongs officially, structurally, to the German Interior Ministry. And, of course, they're using that to essentially push through their own narrative that this is a politically motivated move.
Yeah, they say that, but there's no evidence that this was handed down by a Christian Democrat Interior Minister or a Social Democrat Interior Minister who put pressure on the organisation, the Verfassungsschutz, the Office for the Protection.
But then, sorry, I have to interrupt, but then their boss withdrew from the position to become a member of Parliament for the Conservatives. So that does, have a bit of
if you're the Alternative for Germany,
exactly, you could use that
you would say,
as evidence,
Yeah, I mean, nobody.
That it's not politically objective if somebody is running this institution who then runs as a potential MP. He didn't make it, but yeah.
Yeah, it did not help. I don't think anybody in the Berlin political world who has concerns about the Alternative for Germany looked on that decision well, because that was just not helpful for the integrity of this office. Having said that, this report, at least the report that they did in the interim report that they produced when they said that this is a suspected case, was 1,000 pages. There's reports in the media that this report now is 1,100 pages, and it is not just it's not based on just a kind of hunch. It is, if you look at the statements of the leaders, it's a look at the the platform of this party, and it's an analysis of speeches that they've given. And
so it's not classified information, right?
Some of it may be. That's the thing. That's the other reason why they say we can't publish this.
They have some sources they refer to which should be protected. Yeah. But in the end, most of this, what is written there, is from public sources. You can read that. It's from the party program. It's from public appearances of all these AfD politicians. And they might have some people within the Alternative für Deutschland party organization, who gave them some information. But in the end, it will be public because the AfD already went to court and is now suing the government. And then in the course of these events, these procedures, they will have access to this report, of course, because they have to defend themselves against this report. So they will know what's in there. And then we will also know. I mean, this is not a very secretive operation, actually. And if you look at the Verfassungsschutz, it's a federal agency, of course. There's oversight from the interior minister, for God's sake, because it's an intelligence service, and in every democracy there's oversight of intelligence services, also in the United States, which has like 20 or plus intelligence services. And of course there's oversight, but there's no political direction or tasking or whatever to tell the federal agency to do this or that or to find this or that. This is not the case in Germany. Germany is a country with rule of law, and this will not happen. Yet that might happen in some autocracies or some dictatorships, but not in a democracy.
And this is something that the United States are accusing, the country is the administration, the Trump administration is accusing Germany of becoming a tyranny in disguise. That is what Marco Rubio said. So we've got a short report summing up the United States reaction to that classification of the far-right AfD party as right-wing extremist.
Germany's new chancellor has issued a warning to the US to stay out of German politics. Friedrich Merz's comments come after members of Donald Trump's administration openly voiced support for the far-right AfD, a party that has now been formally classified right-wing extremist. In the latest sign of a growing disconnect between Berlin and Washington, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio blasted the German intelligence agency's labeling of the party as tyranny in disguise. Rubio wrote on X that the move is not democracy. The German Foreign Office hit back. On its X account, it replied to Rubio saying, "This is democracy."
The Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution has legal mandate to protect democracy and the rule of law from extremists and enemies of the Constitution.
So what exactly is the problem with Washington backing the AfD? Parts of the AfD, which placed second in the last parliamentary election, were already classified as right-wing extremist. Now the entire party is being designated as such by Germany's intelligence service. It warns that the AfD could be a threat to the country's democratic order for its anti-migrant incitement, racism and Islamophobia. The move allows authorities to monitor the party's activities more closely, for example with the help of undercover agents. Rubio's critical post was shared by one of the AfD's most prominent members, Bernd Riegert, who himself has been convicted of using Nazi slogans. And Rubio's comments were later echoed by Moscow, which criticized Germany, saying that views which don't fit into the dominant mainstream are being restricted. The AfD has now sued the domestic intelligence service over its decision, saying it is a politically motivated attempt to discredit and criminalize the party. Meanwhile, a recent survey in Germany found that nearly half of the respondents are in favor of banning the AfD since its classification as right-wing extremist.
So the German democracy has a tool to guarantee its survival. And I gave you a bit of a homework before we came into this studio to record the podcast, because, of course, the basic law was written after the Nazis committed terrible atrocities around the world. And this was never going to happen again. Germany was going to, that was the idea of the people who wrote the basic law at the time, to become a democracy that was going to be resilient. Can you just talk to us about the warnings and about the mechanisms that the founding fathers, if you want to call them that, wrote in?
And I have to refer to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, because this is utter nonsense what he's saying there. This is not a sign of disguised tyranny. It's the opposite. It's trying to protect the democracy that we have against tyranny, against the rise of some autocratic or whatever a movement like we had it in the 20s and 30s in the Weimar Republic in Germany then. There was no intelligence service at the time warning people that there's a fascist movement on the rise. And this is the lesson that the fathers and mothers of the Basic Law learned from this period. We have to have an agency that is looking out for people that try to overcome the democratic Basic Law again. And this is what the Verfassungsschutz is actually doing, not only on the right, also on the left. And the Verfassungsschutz is not suggesting to forbid parties. This is the part that the the government and the Bundestag have to do. The Verfassungsschutz is only collecting facts and then giving this report. And in the German history, we only had 2 cases where actually parties were forbidden by the Constitutional Court, who has to do that. And so you cannot talk about tyranny or something like that. And if you look at the United States, for example, and if Mr. Rubio is referring to free speech and things like that, the government is about to forbid TikTok. What's this? This is also a free speech concern, and nobody's saying that the United States is a tyranny because of that. And also, if you look at the United States, also in the 50s, the FBI was going after communists, and the Communist Party was not forbidden. There is no party ever forbidden in the United States so far. But of course, they were looking at people in this left-wing parties, and they had consequences. They were punished, So. But I'm not saying the United States was a tyranny then, and Germany is not a tyranny now. That's clear.
And what is also clear is that the situation that happened in Germany in the 1930s is to be prevented from happening again with those rules, that a person like Adolf Hitler got elected through democratic means and then seized power gradually and then started dismantling democracy. And so, Matt, what are the points of where the intelligence agency is saying this is going too far, this is potentially a very big risk to our very system?
Yeah, the focus really was on as I would say, this breach of 2 articles. One was this idea of the respect of human dignity, which is, I think, in Article 1, and then in Article 3 is this respect for equality of people. And basically, the message is that they're saying that this is a party that has an extremist nature of the entire party with disregard for human dignity, and that it, in its entirety, it undermines a free democratic order. And basically what they're saying is that when you have senior figures, but not just senior figures, but also figures throughout the party, because this, as I said earlier, this is a document that looks at the kind of the dog walkers in the sticks and has been scouring through Facebook, social media accounts, speeches in town halls, and basically saying that they're picking out things like, for example, when the very senior figure in the party, Alexander Gauland, talked about the German soccer team, the national team, back in 2016. There was a big championship, and he's saying that that they've not really they're not a German team in the classic sense. And what he was saying is, there's so many kind of like players of African descent or Turkish descent, and that he was undermining whether or not they were actually German. And it's things like that would be considered evidence that Germans, especially Germans with a migration background and Germans that with Muslims, aren't real Germans.
Different skin colour.
And they're not considered real Germans, and that there is therefore that as a problem, and then that there's a kind of agitation to kind of incite hatred towards these people and discriminate these groups, especially refugees. So it's those 2 things that are the focus of this classification, but with this idea that it's designed to undermine the democratic order. We will find out more, kind of, as Bernd said, in the years to come, because the AfD rejects this vehemently. They're furious. They think that the Verfassungsschutz, the the Office for the Protection of the Constitution, has basically overstepped the mark here by calling a political party a confirmed case of extremism. They're saying that their rights as a political party that are enshrined in the constitution have been damaged by that and been harmed, and this is desperately bad for their... This is what they're saying, right? But you talk to people, and I think that, like, the Alternative for Germany leadership looked really shell-shocked on Monday when they addressed the cameras. They're always on the kind of defensive these days because it's just the nature of the party, but they looked really rattled by the news, and I think there's a lot of concern. And there's, one of the things we talked about is what are the repercussions of this, right? This is a warning, basically. This is the Office of the Constitution saying to Germans, hey, this is a party that's not maybe fully abiding by the Constitution, and it can obviously do more spying, as we know. But one of the other consequences, as we know, is that people who are in sensitive jobs, like teachers, lawyers, soldiers, can now potentially lose their jobs if they have a membership of the AfD. And, I spoke to one MP who said to me, people are asking me, like, what's the situation now? And there's huge concern within the party about that.
But this is not a decision taken by the constitutional agency. Actually, this is also a political decision then. And you have to say that this has happened before. There were other parties named extremist, extreme by the Verfassungsschutz in the past. I think 6 of them. They tried to, after that, then the National Party of Germany, the NPD, they tried to have a process to forbid that one. That did fail because the Constitutional Court says no, the evidence is not clear enough. So this party is still there. They renamed themselves into Homeland or Heimat. So, and also a communist party was forbidden in the 50s and one post-fascist party in the early 50s already. So this is not entirely new, but the AfD is a party, obviously, that is going into that direction, is developing into that direction. It is very big now compared to the other ones. It has like 20% of the voters now. So you can argue it's too big. Actually, not too big to fail, too big to be ignored, or to. And there are many people that say, you cannot forbid the thought or the ideology because 10 million people actually in Germany are voting for this, so you cannot forbid them all. And if you take away this organization, another one will come.
Yeah, but 50 million didn't, and I think this is a discussion that people are having behind the scenes because, of course, there's 2 scenarios. One is you risk essentially idealizing or handing them more fodder, to speak to their own base and say, look, we're being sidelined here, and increasing the support for them. So that is what the people who don't want to push for a ban of the party are saying. And other people are saying, but what else needs to happen? How much more do we need to hear in order for politicians to step up and actually put forward this motion to request an examination of whether this party should be banned? So I'm really interested in hearing what you think about all of that. So make sure that you contribute to the conversation, and we'll definitely stay on the story, of course. And we also have a weekly newsletter that I would really like to draw your attention to. That comes out every Tuesday, has a roundup of all major news from Germany or Germany's view on world events. And until next time, I can only say thank you very much for watching and listening wherever you found us.